Hello, class. I hope you enjoy this story. It is entitled One Triangle's Journey Toward Self-Discovery. Once upon a time, there was a right triangle named Kevin. Unfortunately, Kevin was an unhappy triangle and had been for some time. You see, triangle kind is not that different from humankind. People have very different sides to their personalities, but well-adjusted people are able to integrate the different aspects of their lives into a meaningful whole by understanding how the different sides of their personalities relate to each other. Like all triangles, Kevin had three sides to his personality. There was a dominant side to his personality, labeled C for caring. There were also two supporting sides to his personality, labeled A for assertive and B for big-brained. You see, Kevin was a very caring triangle and quite intelligent, but not all that assertive. What bothered him the most was that he did not feel like he understood the relationship between the different sides of his personality. For example, he wasn't sure how to balance his care for other people with his need to be assertive enough to set healthy boundaries for himself. And he wasn't sure how to use his intelligence to make sure that he expressed his care for other people in a way that was beneficial to them not just in the short term, but also in the long run. Life goes on, however, even when you don't have everything figured out, and in the course of time, Kevin found himself the father of two young triangles, the older one named Bobby and the younger one named Sophia. Like all children, Kevin's kids took after their parents in parts of their personalities, and in other parts were very much individual. For example, Bobby was a real brainiac, as you can see from the fact that the dominant side of his personality was B. And Sophia was the most assertive member of the family, which makes sense because the dominant side of her personality was A. We won't go into the story of why Kevin was a single father. It's enough to say that, despite his personal unhappiness and search for meaning, Kevin was a devoted dad who did his very best to understand his children and help them develop their individual talents. Of course, like all parents, Kevin found some aspects of his children's personalities and behavior difficult to understand. Possibly they were traits that he didn't feel like he shared himself. For example, Sophia was quite athletic and played soccer, basketball, and volleyball at school. Kevin had always hated sports as a kid because he'd always been made fun of for his clumsiness. He worried that Sophia cared more about sports than she did about important subjects like math and writing. On the other hand, Bobby was a puzzle cube fanatic and spent hours every day practicing his speed-solving skills and watching videos of competitions. Kevin worried that Bobby didn't spend his time productively enough and wished that he developed some potentially more career-friendly outlets for his great intelligence and possibly get out more. One day, when Bobby and Sophia were still fairly young, Kevin took them both to the city park like he often did on summer afternoons. As they walked down the sidewalk in single file, Sophia, who was in a good mood that day, shouted out, "Hey, Dad! Look, our family is all similar." Kevin glanced at their reflection in the storefront windows, and sure enough, Sophia was right. There was a strong family resemblance. Despite their three different sizes, they were obviously built in the same way. Not only were they all right triangles, but their other angles were identical as well. Kevin's mind flitted back to biology class in high school, when Miss Hypotenuse had taught them the AA similarity postulate, a principle of triangle genetics that explains, among other things, why the children of right triangles are always similar to their parents. As they neared the park, Bobby and Sophia took off running. Bobby stood on the steps of the swing set and called out, "Look, Daddy, I'm taller than you." Kevin came up with a smile, took out his pocket measuring tape, and said, "Not yet you aren't. You're growing fast, but right now you are only B over C times as tall as I am." Kevin had been pretty good with math in school, and he knew how to find the scale factor between similar figures by comparing corresponding sides. Not to be outdone, Sophia raced up, stood on a higher step, and called out, "Look, Daddy, I'm taller than you." Kevin laughed and said, "Not yet, sweetheart. You're growing fast too, but right now you are only A over C times as tall as I am." Sophia didn't care that much about math, so she just made a funny face at Kevin and then dared Bobby to go down the highest slide with her. Soon they both raced off together to play. As Kevin watched them go, he smiled to himself, musing about how fast his kids were growing up. Suddenly, he had a parenting epiphany. Wait a minute, he said to himself. If the scale factor between myself and Bobby is B over C, then the side of Bobby's personality that has always puzzled me is really equal to B squared over C because it corresponds to my B side. And if the scale factor between myself and Sophia is A over C, then the side of Sophia's personality that has always puzzled me is really equal to A squared over C because it corresponds to my A side. Suddenly, he realized that Sophia's athleticism came from him too, but in a combination of traits that was unique to her, a strengthened assertiveness, mixed with care for her teammates and for her own development. In another flash of inspiration, he realized that Bobby's passion for cubing also came from his own personality traits, in a combination unique to Bobby, a strengthened intelligence mixed with care for his friends in the cubing community and for his own development as a competitive cuber. Kevin resolved to affirm his children's individual interests more intentionally than he had before, even if they weren't the same as his own. Then, shaking off the reverie that he'd fallen into, he went to rejoin his children, who by now were competing to see who could swing the highest. The next morning was a quiet Saturday, and Kevin came downstairs to find Bobby and Sophia, in a remarkable moment of sibling harmony, sitting on the couch together watching cartoons. Kevin went into the kitchen to make himself some toast. And as he said good morning to his kids, he realized just how clearly he could now see the A squared over C in Sophia and the B squared over C in Bobby when they sat next to each other like that. He wondered why those sides of his kids had ever been such a puzzle to him. As he got out the peanut butter and jelly from the refrigerator, another epiphany struck him like a lightning bolt. A squared over C plus B squared over C equals C. He dashed back to the doorway to the family room and looked out. Sure enough, he thought about it. Sophia might be a little bossy at times, and Bobby might be a little bit nerdy, but together they expressed all the caring of Kevin's own caring nature. Kevin returned to making his own breakfast, but his mind was now working fast. He felt that this newfound insight into his children must tell him something deeper about himself. It was right there, just out of his conscious reach, and then it came to him. The key all along was his greatest strength, his care for other people. Multiply everything by C. C times A squared over C plus B squared over C equals C times C. It was so simple, so beautiful. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. At last, he understood how the different sides of his own personality were related. Everything about him had to be brought out and strengthened in order to fit together. Kevin practically wept for joy. Then, finally collecting himself, he called out to the family room to find out whether his kids had eaten breakfast yet. I'm happy to say that, while the full journey to self-discovery is a long one, the insights of that weekend never left Kevin and proved to be decisive in the end. From that time on, he was a more understanding father, while being more compassionate toward himself. He started reconnecting with some of his own childhood interests, and was eventually able to leave his oppressive office job and launch his own innovative startup. When I talked to him about the trajectory of his life since that time, he was very modest. While he emphasized that it was by trying to understand his own children that he'd come to understand himself better, he didn't lay any claim to originality in his ideas. He said that it could all be found in the wisdom of Pythagoras. The end.